Hi, thank you for inviting me. And Nadia, I'm very sorry to hear about um, your family members. I have no other words that would bring comfort. So I'm a historian, and so I'm interested in the sort of deeper historical context. And my current research is actually on Gaza. And I'm looking at 1956. 1956 is the first Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip. And actually, when you look at it, you can learn a lot about what happened next, what happened after 67, and the kind of lessons that the Israelis learned from their own occupation. And as we know, in 1956, there were massacres of Palestinians, especially in Rafah and Khan Yunis. Those, of course, are not that well documented because we didn't have, like SQ was saying, right? We didn't have the kind of technology, right? Streaming, we didn't have social media. We still have, of course, some documentation, but I want everybody to pay attention to the fact that in 1956, when Israel occupied Gaza for the first time, and also the Sinai Peninsula, they considered an occupied territory that will be returned to Egypt. The Gaza Strip in 56, they were interested in annexing. And so they were wondering in the documents that I've been reading, okay, what are we going to do about the civilian population? Now, why is this important? Because, of course, the ultimate fantasy was to incentivize Palestinians to leave the Gaza Strip and go settle elsewhere, right? What they want is maximum land, minimum Palestinians, right? And you can really see that. And that's, only 8 years after the Nakba, right? After 1948. That is definitely their explicit policy. But in 1956, they also realized that Palestinians will probably, for the most part, not leave. And so if we want the land, what it is that we're going to do. And actually, in 56, they came up with all kinds of ideas, right? And we need to pay attention to that because the Israeli army is once again in the Gaza Strip with an eye to occupy the Gaza Strip, and we don't know what they intend to do. Netanyahu said, we're not going to turn it over to the PA, right? So in 56, they were actually thinking about holding on to the Strip, turning it into a canton, so a region that would be annexed to Israel. However, the Palestinians who would be living there will not be granted the same kind of citizenship that Palestinians inside 48 get. Rather, it would be like a Bantustan. So basically, kind of like a South Africa type of situation by which Palestinians will get a couple of seats in the Israeli Knesset. And these representatives that will be elected by residents in this little enclave will represent the Palestinians in Gaza regardless of growing numbers of population, right? Which is, of course, an anti-democratic type of idea. Of course, other policymakers thought that, the United States should donate so we can remove the population altogether to Egypt, to Jordan, to other countries. And actually an Israeli diplomat called Eliyahu Sasson, and this is interesting that he's Iraqi, actually said, you know what, maybe not. Maybe we should actually let the Palestinians from Gaza settle in the Nakab and become like full citizens, basically settle them next to the Mizrahi Jews, right? He was ruled out, of course, right? And so I think right now, as we're seeing the situation unfolding, we need to remember that Israel has always had this policy of maximum land, minimum Palestinians, right? And remember that Rashid Khalidi also said in the last few days that the Biden administration was even considering this solution of pushing Palestinians, right, to Egypt, right, and incentivizing them to settle elsewhere. So I think history is actually quite instructive here, especially since everything that we see sort of happened before in other ways. Even the things that we saw yesterday, right? We saw, I don't know how many that was, the men and boys that Israel captured, right? And kept them outside, like almost naked. It has been done before in 67. It actually was done in 56 as well, 67, 73. And by the way, in Jenin in the early 2000s, right? So it's always helpful to look at the historical precedents to actually learn maybe what might happen